Welcome back. This is our first recorded episode in quite some time. We are so excited to have here with us today Jasper Nathaniel, I believe it is. Yes, and that's not your last name, Nathaniel, right?
That's
is that just what you go by? That is your last name. Okay.
Yeah.
You're a firsty. Yeah.
I am.
That's and Jasper, you are a journalist that is currently in the West Bank right now, and you
I just got back from the West Bank, so I'm back in New York now, actually.
Okay, all right. I apologize, and that's why your connection is so wonderful. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But when you were in the West Bank, you broke some huge stories, like international news stories. So we wanted to have you on to talk about your experience, and then also to talk about the injustice that is raging right now over a young American boy named Muhammad Ibrahim, who is being held in a Ofer prison, which is a military compound prison in Israel. He has been there since February 16th of this year, and on kind of bogus charges of throwing rocks. So why don't you tell us? Let's start off. Yeah.
Start there with Muhammad?
No, let's start with how your trip to the West Bank.
Sure. Can you hear my dog barking right now? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I was in the West Bank for most of October, and it's olive harvest season over there, which is a big, important month for the Palestinians, both in terms of their livelihood, because a lot of farmers make their money off of olives. A lot of the olive oil that we use here in the U.S. comes from Palestine, but also it's a sort of culturally, historically important time of year for Palestinians, and for both of those reasons. It's a very hot time for settler attacks, both in terms of like just robbing them of their olive trees and their olives, and making money off of it, and also destroying their heritage and preventing them from quite literally connecting with their roots. I mean, a lot of the farmers out there are harvesting olive trees that their great grandparents harvested. Mm-hmm. So it's when you see a video of like an olive tree being chopped down by a settler, I mean, that is it takes these things a long time to grow. Some of them have been growing for centuries, if not decades, and so it's a really big deal. So anyway, I was there for October, which is among other things happening in the West Bank. It's the olive harvest season. I started in Masfer Yatta, which is the subject of the documentary No Other Land. It's in the south, the South Hebron Hills, like Bedouin communities, basically. So these are nomadic people who were expelled from. Some of them expelled from the Negev desert, some of them from 48 Israel, and wound up in this area and have been there for decades. Masfer Yatta was designated a military firing zone by Israel, which is just like a completely arbitrary designation, and it was actually held up in court for years and years and years. Excuse me. And just a couple of years ago, the court, they lost their court case, basically. And so the Israeli government, Israeli military now has a sort of ostensibly legal, right based on, the Israeli occupation law to demolish these villages. And so these villages are, quite literally being demolished as we speak. And the, settler violence there is just out of control. But I guess what was interesting about my trip was I started down there, and then I went up near Ramallah and spent some time in what are wealthier, more sort of privileged villages, Palestinian American villages largely. So a couple of these communities, like the one Muhammad is from, is like 80 to 90% American citizens, and these places. Wow. like are on the other end of the spectrum of the Bedouin communities in the sense that these are people who have not been chased out of their homes. They have not faced settler violence. They've been pretty insulated from the violence of the occupation. And now, basically for the first time ever in the last couple of years, they are now facing the same type of violence that is happening everywhere. And I could just keep going. But yeah, basically all over the West Bank, there's like a different flavor of, violence and occupation.
Right. So the area that you're just talking about, was it A, B, or C? Do you know?
The American area?
Well, so I was doing some research about that earlier. The one that Mohammed is from is predominantly looks like
It's
B.
area A. It's area A and B. It's a lot of area B, which means that it's called Al Mazra Al Sharqiya is the name of the village. Jenin, you can probably pronounce it better than me. My pronunciation.
I don't speak Arabic, actually. It's very embarrassing.
All right. Well, my pronunciation is like famously bad. But anyway, it's in mostly Area B, which means that the Palestinian Authority theoretically has administrative authority over it, but that does not stop Israel from going in.
And so, so the area B, which I pulled up, it said the area that Mohammed lives in, 71% of the population of that town lives in that. And so, so there's a small Palestinian Authority presence for like civil issues, but then militarily, the IDF can essentially come in and do whatever they want to under the guise of, security, right? So that opens them up. So basically you just have, the IDF is just in control, right? It's all for pretenses, right? It's all for show.
Yeah, the IDF really goes wherever they want.
Right.
They like Area A, like a lot of the like big cities, like the heart of the cities are Area A, and there's no settlements in the cities certainly, with one or two exceptions like Hebron actually. But yeah, the Israeli military still goes there, kicks down doors and does whatever they want, basically.
Right. Now, where you were at with the olive harvest initially with the Bedouin, what was that? Because I know you had some kind of escort that you were getting by the IDF into these areas, and then they were kind of leaving, and you still had this massive settler presence, like almost immediately.
That was in Termasaya, in one of the American areas by Ramallah. So the Bedouin communities. They have olive trees, but the ones that I was in are not. That's not the primary issue they're facing. The issue they're facing is that settlers are moving in next door into outposts and harassing them. This town, El Khair, is where Auda Hathalin was murdered by a settler just a couple months ago, and now they are facing potential demolition of the entire village, basically. And the IDF is there to, showing up after a settler attack to arrest the victims, basically. But what you're talking about, I think, is Termasaya, which is one of these wealthier Palestinian American villages. The olive fields are, I think, entirely Area B, and it's all private Palestinian land. Despite that, the settlers have been peeling off from various settlements, the big one being Shiloh, which is like right across the olive fields, basically. And what they do is they set up what are called outposts in the olive fields. So this is basically like building a little community that is not even sanctioned by the state of Israel. So there was actually a time when the Israeli government and the military were sort of at odds with this settler movement. I think they ultimately had the same goal, which was to ethnically cleanse the West Bank, but the Israeli government and the military wanted to do it their way, which was through an actual bureaucratic process of building settlements and ostensibly adhering to laws around occupation, even though they were just finding loopholes left and right. So I don't mean to suggest that it was ever they were ever happy to let the Palestinians live in peace, but there was a time when the military was chasing the settlers around the hills and dismantling their outposts and, scolding them basically because they were just causing problems for them, even if, again, the goal was the same. That has changed. So now that the Israeli government is, the short version of it is that, Bezalel Smotrich, who's the finance minister, pulled off this sort of remarkable bureaucratic coup where he installed himself into the defense ministry, took over the apparatus that ran the military occupation. So, the West Bank technically, legally has been under a military occupation since 1967. And so there are international laws associated with that. And so in order for Israel to nominally adhere to those laws, it's the military, it's the defense ministry that governs the West Bank. It is, supposed to be separate from the Israeli government. What Smotrich does is, he's a settler ideologue, far-right extremist, and he just creates a job for himself. He calls it the additional minister in the Ministry of Defense. And he basically just clears out all of these career bureaucrats who were in charge of housing policy and basically civil administration of the West Bank. And what he does is he just installs his settler henchmen, and so all the guardrails that had been on the settlement movement, which again I just want to emphasize for the fifth time, was just to have them do their ethnic cleansing with a little more sort of polish on it. He clears out all those guardrails and puts just the settlers in control. And so that actually happened before October 7th. That happened in early 2023. And that was the sort of big turning point in terms of settlement building, accelerating, and violence just spiraling out of control. They stop enforcing laws against settlers. So all that is a lot of setup to explain why today the military is working hand in hand with the settler movement in a way that is not unprecedented, but it is a much more direct alliance than it was, 10 years ago, even.
Right.
I know you asked me about the actual event, which I'll get into, but I feel like that background is important.
No, it is very important. And I think it's for a lot of Americans who, especially on the right, on the right, we kind of marinate in just propaganda, just total propaganda for our whole lives. I know everyone that I know, that's how they are. And they're just now starting to see things that disturb them. And a lot of people on the right have finally said, okay, well, maybe I should listen. Maybe it's not just, good and evil, black and white over there. And so just to give a little tiny background for people that don't know, because it is hard to conceptualize here in the U.S., if you have a government, it's that you get to vote for that government, right? And so if there's the concept of a military occupation, especially one that has lasted for 60 years, is actually pretty hard for most people to really kind of come to grips with or really picture in their head. So just so people know, what Jasper is talking about in 67, they broke it up. There's the military occupation that he's talking about. We talked about area A, B, and C, and there's different rules for each one. And but the most important thing that you need to know is that any time the IDF can come into any of those areas and set up a checkpoint, set up a military rule of sorts. They can do raids, anything like that, under the auspices of national security. And the Palestinians have no say in any of that. They don't ever get to vote on any of these things. So what Jasper was talking about with Smotrich coming in, this is the little guy. I don't know if you've ever seen the picture of him standing next to Scott Bessett. It's really kind of stark, right? The dude's I think he might be 5'3". He's pretty short. Nothing wrong with short
they
men.
Usually are, but well,
yeah. It's he is a little bit of a little tyrant, and so so he kind of breaks down that military rule, and now they're meshing. So the elections that were held in November of 2022 were actually, most people consider them the most consequential ever, because it took the government from this kind of weird quasi center right to extremely far right, and it put these really, really radical people in charge. And they have been grabbing power left and right and really just kind of pulling the mask off of everything and saying, no, we just want these people the hell out of here. And so starting in 2023, you saw a huge uptick in settler violence all across the West Bank because not only this expansion of civilian government into the military rules, but also a man named Itamar Ben-Gvir, who took over the Israeli prison system as the Minister of National Security. Right. And so they really kind of upticked how long you could be held for, what qualified for a thing called administrative detention, which a lot of people don't know. It's where you just get arrested and then thrown in prison, and then you're never charged with anything, and then they can hold you.
Yeah, I've talked a couple times about how I have a cousin who's been in there for over a year and a half without even any explanation as to why he's there, and he's not allowed to... So he can see his lawyer, but apparently they beat him every time he sees his lawyer, so he doesn't really want to see his lawyer. He has scabies and all sorts of things. So he hasn't seen his wife or children for over a year and a half.
Yeah, so for us in the U.S., and just, I really try to drive it home, is that we subsidize all of this. We pay, in normal years, we pay 20% of the IDF's budget. In not normal years, which is what, since October of 2023, we shell out, 80-90% of what would be a normal IDF budget. So we are directly responsible for this. We're enabling it. The American taxpayer is enabling all of it. And that's why you should care.
I also wanted to sort of back up a little bit and ask Jasper how he got involved in this line of work, because it's obviously not an easy one. It's hard enough, like, taking this position from our desks in the U.S., but actually going over there is obviously many times more challenging and risky. So what led you to pursue this?
Well, I've always been just sort of engaged in this issue. I mean, I'm Jewish, and I never, like, my house growing up was not really Zionist, but it wasn't anti-Zionist either. Just like we didn't really have any family in Israel, and it just like was not present in our home so much. But then I, met a bunch of Palestinians and Lebanese people and Egyptians and in college, and started to learn more about it. And I became engaged, like, intellectually and as just like I don't want to say active, but yeah, I was involved in activism. I think it's fine to say. And then basically what happened was after October 7th, I had been already following what was happening in the West Bank, this big change that you were just describing, Mel, which I also just want to make a quick point about that, which is something that it really just gets lost in internet discourse. There's this like tendency among Israel's harshest critics, like myself, and I think like you too, to sometimes like flatten all of Israeli history and act as if what's happening today is just, this has been happening the whole time. And to be clear, in my view of things, it's always been a project of ethnic cleansing. Where we are today, in my opinion, is the inevitable progression of the Zionist project. However, it has taken on a new, much more extreme, much more violent form in the last couple of years. Yeah. And any Palestinian in the West Bank will tell you that. Obviously in Gaza, they'll tell you that too. But I think that like there's this sort of dichotomy sometimes of like either you think that Israel used to be good and now it's gone to the right and it's bad, or you think that like no, it's just always been bad, but it's actually there's nuance like there is with everything, which is that like it's always, obviously it started with the Nakba, it started with exiling 750,000 people from their homes, but like there was a time when actually even like I know a lot of people who spent time in Israeli prison, and every last one of them says that it just got so much worse after Ben-Gvir took over, like so much. So like everything did get significantly worse. So I just wanted to, make that point.
I agree with you, but I also think it was inevitable, as you acknowledged. Like I mean, I predicted something like this would happen, and I'm not saying I'm not smart or anything. I think it's just inevitable when you have a system that subjugates one people.
Of course,
that this is it's going to end up culminating in some kind of basically genocidal situation.
And I mean, a lot of my research and reporting is about how like. For example, like archaeology played a big role in like the creation of Israel. This like uncovering artifacts that were from like the ancient kingdom of Israel and using that to justify their claim to the land. And what happened in 1967 after Israel occupied Gaza and the West Bank and a handful of other territories is the archaeologists just hopped over the line and were like, hey, look at that. There's also Jewish artifacts here. And so, like, in other words, like when you let the cat out of the bag on, ethno-nationalism, on like, grounding your claim to the land based on biblical and ancient history, there's no putting that back in the bag. And so that's like the settlement movement has always been a huge force in Israel. It just now it is a much stronger force than it was. And I agree with you, Jenin. I think this was always going to happen. And you could see this happening for a long time, basically. Yeah.
Would you agree that I think, to your point, I think that Israeli politics, for the most part, were much more secular, right? And what you've seen is this actual kind of really strong religious ideology that in its very extreme religious ideology, right? It's like if, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like I mean, we have some crazy Christian sects, like really, really crazy Christian sects, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if the craziest one that you can think of, right, took power and then had control over the prison system,
like Hagee or whatever his name is.
Well, that's why evangelicals like Mike Huckabee are so closely allied with him and Smotrich are buddies. Smotrich is in the Religious Zionist Party, which is, they're theocrats, basically.
Right. I was trying to think of, like, more that wasn't already geared towards, like, some kind of weird, worship of Israel itself. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of, like, I don't know. I always think of Waco. That's what I think of when I think, like women in like handmaids, like really like nutters out there who have this, or some like Westboro Baptist. That's a great one, right? Like a freaking villages full of Westboro Baptist nut jobs who believe that God has spoken strictly to them and entitled them to everything, right? Like just imagine having to deal with these people all the time. So like in the last couple of years, it's just the most extreme people you could think of taken over. And so it was bad before and really bad, and nobody's making excuses, but it's like so much worse, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So anyway, to actually answer the question you asked me though, after October 7th, I mean, I saw that very quickly I realized like it's going to get even worse than it's already been getting worse in the West Bank, and nobody's going to be paying attention because we're going to be talking about October 7th, every single day for who knows how long, and now there's a genocide in Gaza. And so I just actually decided I wanted to just commit to covering it. And so I just started going there. The funny thing is it's very easy to get into the West Bank. Well, not for everybody. I mean, if you have an Arabic name,
I don't think for me.
No, but like if you can get into Israel without a problem, which is most certainly Jewish people and most people who don't have Arab-sounding names, you can get into the West Bank pretty easily. I mean, there's places where
you're not on any lists yet.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's possible, but I didn't have a problem last time. I've never had a problem getting in, actually. So anyway, I just started going and covering it, and I just, realized very quickly that the occupation is accelerating and it's taking on new forms, and people are being oppressed in new and cruel and unusual ways. And I just decided, like, I wanted to help those people tell their stories and connect it to the Zionist project and what they were doing in Gaza and the changes in government. And the reason I make that point is because there's a tendency in the mainstream media, when they do cover settler violence, to cover it as this sort of like these fringe extremists who are out, committing like rogue acts of violence, when it could not be further from what's actually happening. I mean, like I said, it's a state project. So anyway, my goal was like, I'm going to tell these stories and I'm going to always connect them to the bigger project here. And so that's just what I've been doing for the last 2 years, basically nonstop.
Yeah, I know. You have had really great coverage. I've followed you for quite some time. And so let's get to Muhammad Ibrahim. I'm saying that correctly, right? Hopefully. Mm-hmm. And so he is a Palestinian American boy, born, raised in America, and I believe it's Florida, right? Tampa area. Mm-hmm. Yep. And his family moved to the West Bank in, it was April 2023. Am I correct on that?
I'm not sure the exact date, but around there.
I think I remember reading about that. It was right before
October 7th.
Mel
has an encyclopedic
before October 7th. And so his family's there, and they're living with the grandmas. What I remember reading, something to that effect. I think it was like a care.
Well, there's a tradition in these Palestinian American villages where, like, they are born in the States, and then they, like, these communities are actually largely built on the American economy, which is an interesting thing about it. Like Muhammad's dad is he does business in New York, or sorry, not New York, in the U.S. And a lot of these guys like own businesses in Florida or Anaheim or wherever. And then they go back to the West Bank to have their kids go to school there for a couple years to basically like maintain their roots there. And most of the time, or a lot of the time, I don't know about the numbers, but they end up back in the U.S., but then they have a real connection to Palestine. And so that's what was happening with this family was, they started in Florida and then they went back to the West Bank for a bit.
Right. And also, as Janine's father has told us, that you have to maintain a connection or you will eventually be cut off and you're not allowed to go back. Yeah. And so that's also really important that people, again, Israel says they don't control the West Bank, but of course they do because they get to decide who can come home and who can't, right? But I digress. Anyways, so Muhammad is there, and February 16th, his family home is part of a raid on their community. And these are midnight raids. This one happened at 3:30 in the morning. The IDF busts into the home and they handcuff him and legs and arms, from what I was reading, and then put him in a van, and he is transferred to Ofer prison, which is a military prison. It's not just, this is where the IDF is in control, and it's actually not even the defense or the prison services, from what I understand, but apparently Gavir still controls all of it. It's very confusing to me. And he's there for a month, from what if I'm recalling correctly, and he doesn't know what he's charged with, and then he is told. Is that right?
What happened was basically he was, dragged out of his home, blindfolded, bound, like you said, taken to Ofer. He has a sworn affidavit. I of course have not gotten to speak with Muhammad, nor has his family. He's had like a couple conversations with lawyers and with U.S. Embassy people. But in a sworn affidavit, he says that he was beaten with rifle butts in the military jeep on his way to the prison, and then he was beaten when he got there, and then he was interrogated. And this part's on video. I don't believe it's been made public, but I've watched it. They basically are, it's, two huge soldiers wearing masks with guns, and this kid is like, he's like a kid. He doesn't even look like, at the time he was 15, but he looked like he was 13 or 14. And he's terrified. He's trembling. And this part is not on tape, but what he says in a sworn affidavit is that They were accusing him of throwing rocks at cars, and again, this is what he wrote in his affidavit, that they threatened that they would keep beating him if he didn't confess to it. And so he says he confessed to throwing rocks. I don't know the exact timing of when he was charged because it was impossible to get that information for a long time. But as of at least a month ago, I have seen that he has now been formally charged with throwing rocks. And then, it begins 9 months of hearings being delayed, not actually ever getting a chance to have a day in court. He contracted scabies. Jenin, I know you said that your cousin did as well. That's been going around the Israeli prisons. There's theories that it's basically chemical warfare, that they are spreading people around with scabies for that exact purpose. The one time that his lawyer did get to see him in the first 3 months, he was down, according to the lawyer, a third of his body weight. I've also seen a medical report from the prison that says he had low BMI, body mass index. So even the Israeli military said that he was underweight. And it's just been a nightmare for the family because they can't speak to him. They can't see him. They can't send him letters. And, to me at this point, it makes no difference whether or not he threw the rocks. I don't think he did, and I believe that it was beaten out of him to confess it. But under what scenario should a 15 or 16-year-old be held for 9 months in a military detention that is known for torture and starvation, not allowed to ever speak with his parents or see his parents? He gets a couple minutes out of his cell every day. It's just a complete nightmare for him and for his family. And they have been raising hell trying to get the U.S. government to help them. And in fairness, there have been a number of congressmen, congresswomen who have, come out in support of them, who have signed letters. The embassy has assigned somebody to their case who has seemingly been able to do absolutely nothing. Marco Rubio, who is a Florida man, famously, has never mentioned the kid's name. Trump, of course, has never mentioned the kid's name. So there's just a feeling that he's been forgotten and abandoned.
What about Mike Huckabee? Surely he's on a case, right?
Well, believe it or not, so Muhammad's first cousin is Saifullah Musalet, who was a 20-year-old Palestinian American who was beaten to death by settlers in the same town where Muhammad was abducted from, just a couple kilometers away from where I was attacked by settlers. And after that happened, Huckabee actually visited the family, and he spoke with Saifullah's father and with Muhammad's father, and he told them that he felt for them and that he was going to fight to get them justice for Saifullah, and he was going to fight to get Muhammad out of prison. He said all the right things, and then they never heard from him again.
Which is totally unacceptable.
Of course.
No, Mike Huckabee, you claim to be a man of God.
Well, that is what is so mad, because every time I post about Muhammad on Twitter, everybody's like, "Oh, he's a terrorist. He threw." It's you're talking about a fucking 15 or 16-year-old here. If people could just for a minute close their eyes, let me paint this picture for you. I was in I stayed with his family in the West Bank. By the way, they know I'm Jewish. They are a practicing Muslim family. They took me right in. They treated me like family. I went into his bedroom. He has toys. He had his knapsack with his homework in it. He had, we found, his dad said it's okay to say this, he had a supplement that was to help improve his appetite because he was he wanted to grow more because he was a little guy. It's a loving family. They have money, frankly. This is not, I think there's just this idea that this is what happens to Palestinians. Even among people who are, ostensibly allies, it's just it's a tragic story of the Palestinians. They're getting blown up and they get abducted. But this is a kid who was taken out of his home. That's what it is. And it's completely unacceptable that the U.S. government, that Mike Huckabee, that all of them have just abandoned him and really done nothing to help get him out.
Yeah,
is there anything people can do? No, I was gonna...
Hold on, real quick.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
We can get to that at the end.
Yeah. As of September 30th, I looked this up today, there are 350 Palestinian children are detained in Israeli prisons. So this is under the age of 16. 168 of them are being held on administrative detention without charge. Okay, so 48%, just no charges. They just get snatched up, thrown in prison. I'm willing to bet that this kid, they found out he was an American, so they knew they had to charge him with something, right? Because, of course, so they charge him with the easiest thing they can, which they say you threw rocks. But of course, we know that's bullshit because he was pulled out of his bed at 3:15 in the morning, okay? And if he had been throwing rocks, they would have put a video that they had. But of course, there is no video. And you don't just arrest people from their beds at 3 o'clock in the morning because they, quote unquote, threw rocks. It's all bullshit. They did a raid, and this was a raid on the village. There were other kids, other young men who were taken. We don't know how many, but that were taken at the same time. This was like a routine thing. This is a thing that happens, right? And it's meant to instill fear and also to, show dominance and force, right? Take your sons, put them in prison. We'll keep them there for a couple years, and we'll teach them that they, quote unquote, you can't ever be a terrorist, right? This is what paranoia does to these people, and this is why they're able to justify it in their heads, because eventually they'll say, well, he would have become a terrorist anyways. Well, you treat people like this, I don't know what you expect them to do. You treat people, it's the natural human instinct to resist tyranny, but
the irony is that I was in a couple weeks before I went to the West Bank, I was in Washington, D.C., reporting a story about the families of Palestinians who have been Palestinian Americans who've been killed or abducted in the West Bank. And so that's where I met Muhammad's family. That's where I met Saifullah's father. And Saifullah's father, Kamel, showed me videos on his phone that he has of his son, Saifullah, who was like hilariously patriotic, like an American patriot. There's a video where he is like at the airport with his friends and he's waving his U.S. passport around and like boasting about being an American. And they're like, he was always like talking about how proud he was to be an American. And the U.S. government has done absolutely nothing to, find the people who literally beat him to death, even though we know who it was. To state the obvious, like these, with a name like Saifullah Musalat, you're just, the U.S. government's just not going to support you. Same with Mohammed Ibrahim.
Yeah. And, being on the right, that's something that I've struggled with because all of these, big talkers on the right, don't tread on me, anti-big government, they got the biggest mouths, the biggest voices, try that in a small town bullshit. And then when they see tyranny, anyone resisting, oh, well, you're a terrorist. That's a terrorist. It's like, actually, do you understand that you're a terrorist? Anyone who claims that they would resist tyranny, that is, you will be classified as a terrorist. So I always ask them, well, what do you expect them to do? And of course, no one ever has an answer for that. And again, this is a kid. This is not a terrorist. This is a freaking kid. This is a kid that the worst thing that they could come up with that he did was he threw a rock.
That didn't even hit anybody, if it happened.
Didn't hit it. Yeah, there's no victim here, The best lie that they could come up with is he threw a rock, and they want to put him in prison for 2 full years.
After he spent 9 months in detention without any.
Yeah, and if you support that, we don't have anything in common. There's no common ground to be found here because this is just basic stuff that you either oppose tyranny or you don't. It's really that simple. And Mike Huckabee, who claims to be a man of God, claims to be a patriot, claims to love this country and the ideas that it was founded on, is a traitor, okay? You have betrayed the ideas of America.
So Jasper, I know you have to run, so we don't want to keep you too long. But one reason we wanted to do this was to try to bring attention to this, and not that we want to overestimate our influence, but hopefully, try to get some attention and maybe change some people's minds. What can people do to support Muhammad?
Yeah, well, I'll send you some links that people can use that basically will tell them who to call and give them call scripts. I mean, the short answer is like where you need a direct intervention from like a Huckabee or Rubio or Trump level person, because all these lawmakers have not been able to do anything. So I'll send you links that you can share. But I think that actually, Mel, to your point, like, I really would like to see this become like a cause that people take up, particularly on the right, people who, like you say, are against tyranny. It actually, like, I find it very upsetting that it's just not, it has not really caught on. I mean, like, certainly people on the internet are talking about it, and like the pro-Palestine movement knows about it, but like, we got an American kid locked in a torture camp, and like everybody needs to be talking about it and getting him out. And the fact is, like, that is what will get him out, is the more it becomes a pain in the ass for the State Department to keep getting these calls, like, finally they're going to be like, all right, let's just like call our friends in Israel and they'll fucking do it, because they'll do whatever we say. So yeah, it's a pressure campaign. Also, just like one last thing, like, I'm not going to name names, but like a lot of people in these Palestinian American towns are huge Trump supporters, actually. Like, a lot of these people are conservative. Their politics are very different from mine, very different from a lot of the Palestinian activists that I know. Like, these are like much more like what you would expect in like a Florida small business owner. So I don't know if that, it shouldn't matter, obviously, but just the reason I say that is because, again, like, it's so easy to like think of these people as sort of so alien to you, but like the people in this particular community, I think, have a lot more in common with your audience than what you would expect, basically.
Probably us.
Certainly than you and me. Yeah.
I always was. I was always telling people when I worked for a libertarian organization for a long time, and I went to a lot of like Federalist Society events and stuff like that with a lot of right wingers, and I was like, you guys are making a huge mistake by being so Islamophobic. Like, you would have a huge constituency. I know all these Muslims who like actually agree with you on most issues, but not Palestine and not the 100%. Islamophobia. Like, it's weird that alliance has like not taken hold. I mean, it's not weird. It's totally predictable, but it's completely true, Jenin. Like, they have a lot of traditional conservative values.
I've found so much common ground with Palestinians and people who support the Palestinian cause. Even like my lefties, like, I find a lot of common ground because I have a lot of lefty followers, and good folk. We just disagree on things like Medicare for all or something like that. You know what I mean? Like Medicaid or whatever. Like, we can, but still, most people actually do think it's really wrong to throw kids in jail for 2 years on bogus charges. Thank God we haven't, and then I just have fun kind of knocking around these psychos on the right who want to come in and say, no. I had somebody earlier say, like, do you know the story of David and Goliath? Stop talking. I need you to go away right away, because I'm going to be really mean. Really, really mean. And but we do have to make more noise. We're going to add all of the contact, but I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to get your take on it, and
we got to get Muhammad out.
Yeah, we have to. Like, it's insane. And the federal government, the U.S. government, again, like I said, is subsidizing these military prisons that these kids are being held in. And, I was curious today. I went and looked up King County, Seattle, right? It's population is very similar to the West Bank. How many kids are in detention there? They have a youth detention center. Of course, their kids are not going to adult prisons. And it was like 121, right? So you're talking about 1/3 of the number of children. And fewer children, of course, all the ones in King County have been charged. Fewer children are in jail with charges in King County, Seattle, than there are in the West Bank. who are just sitting there with no charges whatsoever. And they're sitting, again, in military prisons. So, and all of them 100% subsidized by the American taxpayer. That's why you should care. And this is, we have to do something about it. We have to stop supporting this. So, sorry. Yeah, well, that's about it.
Yeah, we'll let you go. I know you have a busy schedule, but thank you so much for joining us. And
my pleasure.
Please send us.
Have you talked to Muhammad's uncle Z? Have you had him on?
No, we would love to.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll send you his info after he can come on and talk in detail about everything that's going on.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Great. Thank you.